What's up, folks? Welcome back to another video. Remember, this is an entire series where we kind of walk you guys through how to build this entire merge stack application. If this is your first time on this channel, this is where we help you become a full stack developer. So if you're new here, consider subscribing, and we'll be right with you after the pause. And again, this might look ugly. We're gonna style this in a second, but the goal is to kind of walk you guys through and show you how everything is connected end to end. In the last video, we show you guys how we can send those data back to our server, and then we actually went ahead and clearly explained you guys the difference between extended false and extended true. If you haven't watched that video before, definitely go back and watch that video. So in this video, we're going to focus about displaying the data into the page, where now that we have some data into our database, we're going to try and focus and displaying that data into the page. So let's dive right in. All right, so if you guys remember, the data that we had on the server is now available on port 8080/API, and if we do that, we can get all the data that we need from the backend. So what we need to do in our case is somehow we don't want to be able to get those data back to our client. So how can we do that? In order for me to do this, I'm going to go inside the client folder, inside the app.js, and this is where I'm going to be writing a function. I'm going to call this one get blog post, and this entire function is going to be the one that go ahead and get those data from our server. So this one's going to be using Reactjs, and Reactjs is going to take that get. And if you remember, we don't need to do /localhost port 8080/API. All we need to do is just type /API, and that will automatically communicate with our server. Again, if you don't know what to do that, feel free to watch this entire series. And then we're gonna pass our promise here. All right, and then we have our promises, which means in case we do have the data, and this is just in case we do not get the data. For this one, I'm gonna go here, instead of console log, I'm just gonna alert something for now. Something like error retrieving data. Now, don't do this into a real world application. This is just for this demo, but in a real application, you're definitely gonna need to handle your error properly. So in this one, once we have the data back, the data is going to be coming as a response. And then to get our data, I'm going to go here in order to get the data, I'm going to do response.data, and that's going to go ahead and get us our data. Now, remember, this entire data is going to be a post of data that's going to look like this, which is going to be an array. So what we can do in our case is we can have a variable here called post, and that will be an empty array for now, which is going to contain that list of the array. So once we have that, I'm going to go here and set state with that post data. I'm going to go here and set post. That's going to equal to the data that'll coming in. So technically, every single time that we want to get all the posts, all we need to do is call this function, and then we're going to go ahead and get that post. So when do we want to call this function now? Of course, we do have this function, but we need a way to call it. Well, we want to call it whenever the component did mount. And this is when we're gonna call this function right here, which this is how we're calling this function in order for it to go ahead and execute everything that it's doing. So let's take a look and see if this works. So technically that should set the data and also console log the data has been received. So let's take a look. Boom, and there you go, ladies and gentlemen. You see now our state contain all that post, and here is the console log from that saying the data has been received. Okay, so technically that is working end to end. But now that we have the data coming in from the database and being stored inside our state, how can we display that into the page? Well, in order for me to do that, I'm going to go inside the render function and inside that div, and I'm going to go right after that form element. I'm going to add a div with a class called blog post, and then I'm going to create a function to render every single post in here. So I'm going to call this function display blog post. And this one's going to contain the post that'll come in every single post. And then we want to do a quick check and say, all right, if there is no post, we want to return null. We want to return something empty. How can we check if there is no post? In order to do that, I'm going to do post.length. So technically this is checking and see if the post is empty. Then if this post is empty, we're just gonna go ahead and stop that function right there. If it's not empty, then we're gonna go ahead and start looping through that post. That's gonna contain every single post, and we're gonna add a div right here. In that div, we're gonna add h3 tag, which is going to contain the title, and then a p tag that will contain the detail of that post. Now we're going to go here and use that post and also use the index. I'm going to go here and use that index right here for the key. And this is something that React wants us to do for every single time that we loop in over an element. Inside that h3 tag, we're going to add that title here, which is going to be post that title right there. And then inside this one is going to be post that body. That's going to be the body of every single post that are coming in. And once we have that, we need to make sure that we return this entire function. And believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, this is everything for that particular function. So in order to get this to work, I'm going to copy this function. I'm going to call this function right here. I'm going to say this that black post, and we're going to pass it the list of the posts that we are getting in the state. If you remember, this will be the one containing all the posts. I'm going to go here and refer to that. I'm going to do this, that state, that post, and that should do everything for us. So let's take a look. If I save that, and there you go, all the posts are displaying, which is fantastic. So if I reload this, and there you go, all the posts are now coming back. Now check this out. If I go back into my database and I go here and delete every single document, and if I go back to the page, refresh it, of course, nothing will show up because we don't have any posts. However, when we add a new post, let's assume that we add a new post and click submit, I'm expected to see the new post that I added display over here. Now the issue is it only comes whenever I refresh this page, which shouldn't be that case. So how can we do that? What we need to do is every single time that we save a post, if you remember, so this function was the one that was saving the post. And remember, it makes an HTTP request to send those data on the method post. And then after everything's sent back, then it will set that input. So what we need to do is if everything has gone right after this input has been reset or not, then we want to make another call to get the latest updated value from the database. What I mean by this is we need to call this function, which is the one that are getting the post. This function, we also need to call it right here as well. And what that's gonna happen is after it submit the form and it knows that everything went well, then it's gonna go ahead and get the latest from the database. So that's all this function is doing. So if we save that, so when the page reload, this line execute. So when the component did mount, then this line execute. However, when we add a new post now and add something like this and click submit, and there you go, our new data was added because now it get the latest from our database, and so on back and forth, which is fantastic. Now everything is working end to end. So let's review everything we talked about before we go any deeper. Okay, so what we've done is we're creating this function, and this function is dedicated whenever we call it, it's going to go and get the latest from our database on that particular route. Now whenever the component mount, that's when we call this function. Okay, so that's when we are calling this function whenever the page did mount. However, whenever we are submitting a form, which is this is the event and this is the function that is submitting a form, which is this function right here. So what's going to happen is after it sends that data to the backend, then after the successful response, then it call this function. I'm referring to this particular function, which is going to go ahead and get the latest from the database, which is fantastic. Now our application is functional. However, it doesn't look nice. So in the next video, we're going to focus on adding some CSS to really style it the way that we want it before we deploy this one to Heroku. So see you guys in the next video.